Hi, everyone. Oops, we've got a little issue here, which I'll get fixed in a second. Just trying to organize my laptop and be on screen. So hi, everyone. If you are in the chat, please let me know who you are, where you are watching from, and importantly, whether you can hear me. That would be great. I'm just going to make sure that my audio is coming in from the right place. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me. Let's see. Yes, it looks like it's coming through. All right. So hi, Sarah. Hi, Christina. Welcome back. Nice to see that you were able to join today. Hi, Christina from Brazil. You can see and hear me. Awesome. Puerto Rico. Hello. Hello, Abla. Wait, is that your first name? Did I get it right, Abla? Please let me know if I got your name wrong. I know. Alma, sorry. Hi. Hello. Hi, Maria. Great. Hi, Curly Top Reads. Okay, so as you know, we are at a very powerful point in our reading together, in our journey through the Octavia E. Butler slow read. We are at the beginning of our very last series in the slow read, and that is the parable of the sower and parable of the talents. So once we finish parable of the sower and parable of the talents, all we're going to have left are standalone stories or collections, short story collections. So we'll have Fledgling, then we'll have Bloodchild, and then we'll have Unexpected Stories. And then we will have completed our slow read through everything that Octavia E. Butler has published, which is super, super exciting. Hi, Tati, and hi, Pat. And yes, thank you for the warm hello. And yes, Earthseed is a series you were most looking forward to reading. And hello, Tanga from Long Island, New York. It's great to see so many of us here. Hi, Tamara. So my question for you as we go into reading the parable of the sower, and just to let you know, I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently. So instead of asking you how long you want the sprints to be, we're going to do 3 half-an-hour sprints. And that way we'll just hopefully streamline it a little bit more with a question in between each sprint. So the question that I have for you before we start our sprint is, given that this is the third series that we've read, we started with the series that began with Wild Seed. And it's actually escaping me the name of that series. Tati, can you remind me what that one was called? Is it the Patternist series? So we started with the Patternist series. That was the first one. And then the second one was the Xenogenesis series / Lilith's Brood series. And now we are here doing Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And I'm wondering, what is most important for you as you enter into reading the last series in our slow read? So if we look at the series as just one set, right? What was Octavia E. Butler trying to convey to us in the Patternist series? And then what did she convey to us in the Xenogenesis / Lilith's Brood series? And then what do we look forward to in the Seed to Harvest or Earthseed series, right? So I'm wondering if you can share your thoughts in the chat, because I think it's important that as we read this, I think one of her most, if not the most widely known novel that she's ever written, Parable of the Sower, and certainly the one that's been getting the most acclaim since COVID-19, since 2020, and all of the things that happened that year and that continue to happen. This is the novel that has been referenced as an example of how prescient her writing was. So, what are you looking for as we begin Parable of the Sower? Whether it's a first-time read for you or whether it is a reread for you. Really curious to hear your thoughts. So, why don't you put that in the chat? Hi, Juanita. What are you looking for? And so I'll just read the synopsis in the back. So while you're answering your questions, Parable of the Sower. So when unattended environmental and economic crises lead to social chaos, not even gated communities are safe. In a night of fire and death, Lauren Olamina, a minister's young daughter, loses her family and home and ventures out into the unprotected American landscape. But what begins as a flight for survival soon leads to something much more, a startling vision of human destiny and the birth of a new faith. Okay. Hi, Dr. VP. So I've asked you, what are you looking forward to in this new series? Hi, Geraldine. All right. So we've got Dr. VP looking for something to feel hopeful for, some strength and reason to persist. And I definitely think that this this duology delivers. Some of you might know that Octavia E. Butler had planned to continue this series with another book, which was to be called, not you, Siri, which was to be called Parable of the Trickster. And apparently there are early drafts of that novel in the Huntington collection of her works and ephemera from her life. Does anybody else want to share what you're hoping to encounter in this read of her work? And while you're doing that, I'll get our 30-minute sprint up and running. And we'll just get going. Okay, let me just share the screen here. So, Abla, you've said, Alba, sorry, how much the world in Parable of the Sower mirrors the contemporary world around us. And I think that's really, that is a thought that I've heard from a number of different people. Folks are really interested in seeing what linkages can actually be made on their own terms between the world that we're living right now and what the world was envisioned to be by Octavia E. Butler when she wrote this book. And speaking of which, we have 1993 as the copyright for the version that I have right now. And we're in 2022. And so, that's the passage of time, right? So, and the book begins chapter 2024. So it begins with a date stamp of Saturday, July 20th, 2024. So 2 years from now. So what does that timing, mean for us? And Juanita says, first time for me, I don't have any expectations. Okay. So let me get my shared screen up. Chrome tab, Google. Okay. All right, everyone. So we're going to begin with our first 30-minute sprint. Happy reading. And I will see you after half an hour so that we can discuss the beginnings of Parable of the Sower. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome back after our first half an hour sprint. I have put a question in the chat. So, the question for discussion is the story begins on Lauren Olamina's birthday, and recall that Kindred began on Dana's birthday. And the story begins on the eve of Lauren's baptism in the Baptist faith. How does that help us begin the story? How does it help us enter into the story? So please reflect on that, and I will show your answers. We'll take about let's take about like 5 to 10 minutes to discuss. You don't have to answer that question, but for those who would like to have a prompt to get us into the discussion, you can use that prompt. And for others who want a more general question, how are you feeling about the way that the story began? For me, I'm struck. This is probably the 6th time I've read Parable of the Sower. And I'm struck by Lauren Olamina's, like the origin story of Earthseed that we're coming into contact with. So we learn, excuse me, we learn pretty much right away about Robledo, about California, about the world that that Lauren Olamina is a part of, how stark and dangerous and violent it is post-apocalyptic / apocalyptic, right? And she's a teenager growing up in this world, and I'm just struck by how much she's able to understand about what's happening around her. I'm struck by how creative she is, and just how harsh the world is, and how harsh she is in some ways, especially when we hear her starting to describe how she manages with her hyper empathy. We're also, if you got far enough, you would have been introduced to hyper empathy. So curious as to your thoughts about that and why we're given hyper empathy here. And for those who have been with us in the slow read, if you look back at all the books that we've read up to this point, what does hyper empathy offer us as a syndrome, and how does that connect to other speculative things that we've seen in her books up to this point? So those are some thoughts, and I'll go to your answers. So Sarah, a spiritual rebirth in a way. And I want to press into that a little bit because, she says really early on that she's getting baptized because it'll please her dad. I think that's like on the first page or two. And she's doing it because she's chosen to do it. She's doing it to please her father. And she kind of finds it like a waste of money, a waste of time, a lot of pomp. And yet she does it. And before she goes and does it, she shares with us, the reader, her thoughts about religion, about God, about her father's belief systems and the belief systems of people around her. And she's showing us that, right? Like Mrs. Sims and her father and Keith. And there are all of these different models of like religion. So I find that super interesting. So I like the spiritual rebirth. Maybe by doing this to please her father, maybe she is, deciding that she's going to, it's going to be something that's also going to serve her, right? It'll maybe help her relationship with her father in some way. Tanga says having God in their life. Yeah, I mean, God shows up all over the place in Parable of the Sower, and we've seen a lot of references to God here. And we see that we're already introduced to her questioning the notion of God. We see in the first excerpt from Earthseed, the books of the living, God is change. We see her asking questions about God. A gift of God may sear unready fingers. Yeah. Another question that I have is, what do you make of the dream, her recurring dream that seems to come on every birthday? The dream where she's flying and there's this cool light coming from a doorway. And it seems like in her dreams in the past, she hasn't been able to like fully fly. But in this one, she's able to fly and kind of direct herself. She wants to go through the door with the cool light, but this time she finds herself veering off and almost like hitting a wall and getting engulfed by fire that comes through the wall. So what do you make of that? Tamara, they are literally going through a rebirth. We know that Lauren is starting a new path and way of thinking about God. And Dana's journey back in time was about to begin. Yeah. So they're literally going through a rebirth. Because certainly, I think Dana is 26 or 27 when we meet her in Kindred. And Lauren is 15, 16, I think. She's 15 when we meet her here on her birthday as well. And I think, can somebody check? I think Dana's birthday was in June, I want to say. So whatever that means to anybody. Okay. So yeah, definitely new beginnings. It is interesting that as a young person, she's examining the man-made construct of God and religion. Yeah, the questions she asks herself are very profound. And I mean, in a world where there's so much trauma, right? We see murder, we see rape, we see theft, we see arson, we see like fights, we see greed, self-protection, social stratification. We see a police that collect fees from individuals in exchange for protection, right? Like we're seeing a very harsh and violent world. And she is the daughter of a minister who was also a professor and also a dean. So certainly at least upper middle class prior to the fall of the political regime. So she's a smart girl and a girl would have had access to books and scriptures and people and some measure of power through her father. And yeah, she's looking around her and she's seeing stuff, and it's a lot. And she's got independent ideas. Yeah. Question, what do you think about her thoughts about the astronaut who couldn't be buried on Mars? And just the astronaut in general, the space program, the Department of Space Nautics or whatever it was. What do you think of that? Okay. I found it interesting, her questioning religion and other people's answers when you question them about their beliefs. I myself believe in God, but I think it's healthy to question things. Yeah. And I don't believe organized religion has the answers for everything or is necessarily the right way of having a relationship with God. Yeah. I love that I can certainly identify with being a young person questioning God and questioning religion. And I appreciate how stark Octavia E. Butler's writing is here, and how she, by giving us a 15-year-old protagonist, she opens us up to like the courage and fearlessness that youth sometimes have on taboo topics. So we get to live in her mind as she asks questions that perhaps Dana, or other protagonists that we've seen so far in the read who are older than Lauren is at the beginning of the text would not ask, or would not ask in the same way. Dr. VP, hyperempathy, a reminder that most of what one feels is coming from the world outside. Not that knowing this is particularly helpful at feeling better, but just a reminder. Yeah, so I like that the knowing, it might not be particularly helpful at feeling better, but just a reminder. And it's interesting when she talks about her ability to how she goes about managing her hyperempathy. That was interesting to read, the coping mechanisms she created. If you've gotten as far as to be exposed to the character Keith and Keith's role in the family and Keith as a person, what do you think of Keith, her eldest brother? What do you think of Keith? Okay. Her age, in many ways, she's very much a teenager, questioning everything, exactly, talking about her dumb brother. In others, she is so unique. Yeah, she's definitely relatable, um, and very self-assured. I really liked how self-assured she is, and how she even talks about pleasure. She's a sexually active young woman who speaks really clearly and courageously and unabashedly, like actually quite casually, about um, her sexual relationships and her sexual being at 15. Maria, she said she dreamed a lie, but I don't think I quite followed what the lie was. So she said she dreamed a lie. Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. Today is our birthday, my 15th and my father's 55th. Tomorrow I'll try to please him and the community and God. So last night I dreamed a reminder that it's all a lie. I think I need to write about the dream because this particular lie bothers me so much. I don't know, maybe maybe the lie is that she believes in this baptism and that she's doing it because she's truly committing to the faith. Um and she's choosing to be washed clean, and whatever it is that the baptism represents. And so on my page 14 it says about the baptism. So in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Catholics get this stuff over with when they're babies. I wish Baptists did. I almost wish I could believe it was important the way a lot of people seem to, the way my father seems to. Failing that, I wish I didn't care. So she says this right before she talks about like Keith's perspective. He doesn't really care. Um, but maybe the lie is what she's expected to promise through baptism. Maybe the lie is that this actually matters to her, and she's actually doing it because she cares. So maybe. Rebirth, fire, cleansing water, a lot of symbolism. 100%. Okay, thank you very much for that. We're going to do our second 30-minute sprint. I'm going to share again, and then I will reset the timer to 30 minutes. Happy reading. Hi, everyone. Okay, so that is the end of our second sprint. I am currently on page 43 of my version. My version has 329 pages. And I was kind of thinking, I should probably divide these pages into three and see how I'm going to what pace I should be reading at. So I put a discussion question in the chat. For discussion, if you lived in Robledo, that's the community that Lauren Olamina lives in, how would you coexist with your neighbors? How would you protect yourself? I'll answer my own question. I would probably live collectively. I think I would probably contribute to I would want to know my neighbors. I wouldn't isolate myself. I would probably have a garden, and I would probably help out with the school, share my skills and so on. And I would probably have a problem with Lauren Olamina's father because he's super patriarchal and I don't like that. And he's a minister and we probably wouldn't get along. But I would work in concert with the people of Robledo, like my neighbors, to keep the community safe and collective and as protected as possible. But I would certainly make sure that I had all of the things that, I'm not a prepper, but I feel like if I lived in Robledo, I would have to learn to become one and have things that would keep me safe nearby. I guess it's hard for me to imagine the different options of how you would live in that particular society. Certainly, clearly there's strength in numbers, and you can't not work with your neighbors because the threat is so imminent, perpetually imminent. So yeah, I would probably have to learn a lot of life skills that I don't have, like foraging and planting and sewing and repairing things and all of that. So what about you? And of course, you don't have to answer any of these questions. You can just talk about what your current the current excerpt that you've read, what that has caused you to think about. So I'll go to your responses, and after we have our little discussion, we'll have one more half an hour sprint. Okay, so community can be safety, Sarah. I would struggle with having or using guns. Yeah, I would as well. I don't even play with, well, that's not true. I've done like paintball or laser tag or water guns. But yeah, I think I would have a really hard time with guns as well. I don't know how long I would have a hard time with them because in the world that Octavia E. Butler is painting for us, it seems like you have to be ready to shoot people. So if I had like a daughter who was being attacked by someone, I would need to use a gun. But I've never really had to encounter that. But yeah, that's certainly something to think about. I don't like talking about guns or thinking about having guns or thinking about shooting or any of those things. And certainly I'm Canadian and guns are not a thing that like the average person could just like get a license for and have. So they are things I don't feel any comfort with at all. So yeah, it would be certainly quite difficult. I agree. Orange Rhymer. How I would coexist. Tell my neighbors what my boundaries are and what assistance they can expect from me. Medical training, fixing stuff, general knowledge. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like boundaries. It seems like, at least where I am in the book, there are a number of different ways that people coexist. Like I've gotten to a part in the book where there's a new couple introduced into the community, and they're in the process of explaining what they will and will not do. And it's interesting to see how the community, or at least how Lauren and her family, who are in a leadership position in Robledo, how they're seeing the boundary setting that's happening, how they're participating in that. And then like what assistance they can expect from you. And like, I wonder, Orange Rhymer, like what if there was a danger in the community and you were needed in a way that you hadn't agreed to? Like what could that potentially look like, Yasmin, it seems they don't trust each other but are willing to pretend to coexist. Yeah, I mean, certainly there seems to be these like short-term alliances, We understand that we need to trust each other this far. In the excerpt that I just read, Lauren talks about who she trusts and why she doesn't trust a particular individual. And yeah, it seems like there are members of the community who certainly haven't earned the trust of the community and maybe don't even trust their neighbors, but kind of have this like tacit agreement that they'll try, I guess, to do right by each other in a really general sense. So that's interesting. And as I say that, I wonder how different that might be from what, how we operate. Like, who are your neighbors? Do you know their names? Do you like them? If their house was on fire, what would you do? Why? Some interesting questions that this has me thinking about. What does it mean to be a neighbor? And of course, with the Christian underpinnings, the biblical underpinnings of this particular story, the, loving thy neighbor certainly comes up here, right? What does that actually mean in practice? And should it mean different things in an apocalypse? Emergency plan and self-defense. Yes, definitely self-defense for sure. And what I really appreciate about this story is the way that Octavia E. Butler is introducing us to the different like levels of violence that exist. She definitely did not shy away from gender-based violence and race-based violence. And she's not like, it's amazing because when you read speculative fiction and science fiction, even though we know that whenever you have a group of people who are engaged in like violence with each other, there's always sexual violence of some sort. We know that to be true, but in most science fiction books where there is war or violence or apocalypse, they don't really talk about the fact that that often means sexual violence. And here, Octavia Butler is not letting us look away from that. In every circumstance, every time there is a violent encounter, she has us reflecting on how that impacts women and girls. And that is something that I'm noticing more during this read than I have in reads past. So I'm certainly reflecting on that. And I wonder, for those of you who are coming to the live show, I think that's something I want to talk about. I think. Maria definitely would want to relationship build and work collaboratively, but sounds like it would have real challenges with some of those neighbors. Yes. Anyone in particular? I know a couple that I would really have a hard time. I think I would have a hard time with Mrs. Sims. I think I would have a hard time with Lauren Olamina's father. And I would have a hard time with that. There's a Hotep character that I would not be okay with. And you probably have already gotten to this part, but there's one part that I read in the first excerpt. There's a family that had this like big TV, and so they, sold admission to their house so that people could watch movies and watch the news and so on. I think I would probably struggle with like paying my neighbors to watch their TV. But who knows? Curly top. They still have prejudices amongst each other, even though they literally are struggling to survive. Yes, it would make sense for them to work together, but they are too stubborn to do so. Yeah, and why does Octavia E. Butler give us that? Why does she show us their failings and their flaws? What is she setting us up for? Orange Rhymer, for what they can expect from me, I mean to describe to them what I'm competent in and what I'm not, though that could cause safety issues, read bad actors. Yeah, okay, I hear you. And the last comment before we go to our last sprint. I find it funny how Lauren's father is a pastor, but still doesn't help out much in his community. I'm glad someone said it. I mean, he helps out by like imposing structure and telling people what to do and how the community is going to run. Isn't that helping? The best way to bring people to God is showing grace and kindness and helping people, not shunning them. And Bianca, the idea of not looking away from sexual violence is an interesting take. When it comes up in mainstream formats like Game of Thrones, we often say, do we need to see that? Yeah, and I think that, there's certainly a question to be asked here. And what, is it, because for Game of Thrones in particular, just stepping out of Octavia E. Butler's world for a split second, and then I'm going to go right back into it. But with Game of Thrones, a lot of the early critiques of that was that the sexual violence was gratuitous. And so it served no purpose except to just like, I don't know, give people something to watch that they didn't have to accept they found to be titillating in some way. I think that the way Octavia E. Butler does it, though, is that she describes the sexual violence in a way that at least allows me as a reader to appreciate that there are so many levels and degrees of harm that are being experienced, and that doesn't erase whole groups of individuals from from apocalypse. And I think that by describing the way that women and girls experience violence in this world, we can come to admire Lauren Olamina's strength even more. Because I mean, we know that this is a story about her and her particular literal journey. And so we know what her options are. We know what's beyond the wall for her. And we know the cost of dreaming a world other than what she's embarking on. And I think that's really interesting. Trying to be in relationship with neighbors that are clearly racist and or using their religion to harm and judge others, I'm not confident I could get past those things. Yeah, same. And yet, outside of the wall, there are people addicted to drugs that cause them to like burn homes down. And you will meet like sudden, immediate harm in certain circumstances outside of the wall. Are we compromising our values by accepting behaviors because the alternatives are even worse, And I feel like this is a classic Octavia E. Butler, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So what's the lesser evil? And then how do you make peace with that? I feel like in every single story. We always have a Black woman who doesn't get the happy ending, and has to make do with something much less. So, yeah, very true. Often people enjoy it in some messed up ways, but it would be painful in actuality. Yes. We never learned from our mistakes. As long as we continue to divide ourselves, we continue to make the same errors. History repeats itself and all that. And last comment, the father seems to regard being poor as a sin. As a preacher, you would think he would engage in some type of outreach at like the naked young girl he saw outside the wall. Yeah, and I guess, I mean, think about whether, like, what role her father has played in the creation of Earthseed, right? Like, she's writing this religion. She starts writing it at 12, and she starts creating it, I think, in defiance of her father and the hypocrisy that she sees, right? Like, she's offended by this hypocrisy and she sees it everywhere, right? She's like, how are you all so God-fearing, but Mrs. Sims, you'll do what you did to yourself, even though you know that it's sinful. And so she's looking around and she's like, y'all are nuts, right? So for me, I need to write something that's true to myself. And not only true to myself, but she is so certain at 15 that what she is seeing is the truth about God and the truth about the world around her. And I think that's really fascinating. Okay, good talk. This is going to be our final half an hour sprint. And happy reading. See you in half an hour. Hi, everyone. That was our last sprint. Thank you very much for joining us today and getting started with Parable of the Sower. So, as we leave, just a general question: how far have you gotten in your reading? And what are you leaving today's slow reading session with? It could be a thought, it could be a question, it could be a feeling. It could be anything. So, what are you leaving today's session with? For me, I am on page 67 of 300 and something. And there has been a lot of annotations in my reading, and I am definitely marking things that I'd like to read for the sound circle. And one of the things that I'm finding evocative of this version, like this current read, is the comparisons between different characters' approaches to certain challenges. So I'm thinking about Lauren Olamina's approach to survival versus her father's, Lauren Olamina's views about community versus her friend Joanne's. I'm thinking about Joanne's, Aura's or Aurora's response to the dog versus Lauren's. Like, just there are a lot of moments where Octavia E. Butler demonstrates the way in which Lauren approaches things. Um, and I think that it's an invitation to look at ourselves and to ask the question, would I be more like her dad in his approach? What do I think of his advice to her? Would I be more like this community or that community? And the theme of like fear is really interesting to me. What people do when they're afraid of change. What are they capable of when they're afraid of change? So those are the things that I'm leaving today's slow read with. And so what are you leaving the slow read with for today's session? We will have 2 more sessions before we finish, before we get ready for the live show. And I'm just gonna, if you're reading from this version, you will have about 329 pages to read before next week. So I'm going to divide that into 3, and that's about 109 pages per section per session. So that means that so what I would ask you to do is, whatever version of the book you're working with, if you want to have the book finished before the live show, you'll need to read probably in between sessions, because I'm going to be doing 3 half-an-hour sprints for each slow read session. So for me, that means between now and Friday, I have to read 42 pages, which is completely doable. So that I'll be on page 100, and the goal is to be on page 109, and I'll tell you where that is. 109 and 110. So the closest. Okay, so that takes me to chapter 10. Yeah, it takes me to about chapter 10, I think. No, it takes me further. Let's just call it chapter 11. So if you want to read, if you want to pace with me, which you don't have to, but if you do, then you should read up to the end of chapter 10, which ends with the words, "I wish Dad could cry." That's all it says. "I wish Dad could cry." And that would be page 115. And so just for people who are watching, that is the page that you should read up to. You can pause the video and make sure you've read up to that page. And if you are reading the graphic novel, then it's page 92 in the graphic novel. Okay. And then we will, if we are pacing together, then we should be starting from chapter 11 with the goal of getting through as much as we can of the 100 pages. So there'll be some reading in between. All right. Okay. Let's see what you are leaving with. Sarah, you're at 16%. Hi, Regina Renee. You're most welcome. You're leaving with questions regarding people's capacity for self-denial. Absolutely. 100%. Is the option to go to Mars still open? I hope so. Dr. VP, up to Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, left with more wondering, how then now shall we live or not? Yes. Hi, Connie. How time, pain, and brightness are positioned against each other in the book so far. I want to hear more from you on that, Connie. Time, pain, and brightness. I want to hear more about that. Orange Rhymer, the end of August 17th, 2024 entry, change is being only superficially in the common wisdom that our religions may affect our perception of change. Cool. You're on page 39 in my version. Okay. Just feeling the very quick decline in human kindness or caring. Everyone is getting more and more concerned about themselves and less about community. Thanks, Tamara. What book is that? What are you talking about? What's your question, Tati? Page 55 out of 329, seeing similarity between how Lauren views her world with how the rebel humans saw the world, lacking a real future. Do you mean in Xenogenesis? How Lauren views her world with how the rebel humans saw the world, lacking a real future. Mm-hmm. And so if we look at the protagonists in the books we've read so far, we had Dana in Kindred, we had Anyanwu in Wild Seed, and Mary, and I'm just focusing on the Black women. And then we had Lilith in Xenogenesis, and now we have Lauren. So Dana, Anyanwu / Emma, Mary, Lilith, and Lauren. And I think, as we continue to go through and read these, we're also going to meet another protagonist in Fledgling, Shori. But I think that at the end of the slow read, I would love to spend some time with each of the characters engaged in conversation together. Maybe we can even dramatize that just to see what they have to say to each other and what they offer us. So anyway, that's just an idea that I have for ending things. So what edition am I writing in? Okay, so first of all, because of you, I didn't write in my special edition. So I'm reading the same one you are, Tatiana, and I am writing in it with paint pens. Okay. All right. So yes, in the Xenogenesis story. Okay. Hear you. No, you're fine. Okay. Page 26 of 329. You missed the first 30 minutes, but you'll catch up. That's great. Bianca, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for this. It was so relaxing, thinking about change and how our resistance to it creates more pain. Praise be. Okay, so please mark the next slow read date in your calendars. We are going to be meeting again this Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. So if you aren't currently subscribed to ONYX Pages, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That will alert you to when I am going live. Between now and Friday, your homework is to read up to the end of chapter 10 in Parable of the Sower, because we will be beginning from chapter 11. And if you are reading along and you want to maybe like share what you're reading, or share your thoughts, you're absolutely free. If you're on Instagram, you're free to, maybe what I'll do is I'll take a picture of the book and I will post it on my Instagram channel. And if you want to comment in the next couple of days about what you're reading as a way to sort of connect, please feel free to find me on Instagram, and we can just keep up with each other in between the slow read sessions. You're thinking about how much you identify with the word hyperempathy. Yasmin, you appreciate how Lauren allows space for young people and children. I think she realizes that they will facilitate change. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us as part of the Octavia E. Butler Slow Read. Those of you watching in the rewatch, thank you very much for pacing along with us. I hope that this reading session helps you get into the work a little bit deeper, and to be a part of the community, even if it's sort of asynchronous in terms of time. And we will see you on Friday. Have a wonderful week. And thank you for reading with purpose. Bye.